So, E3 just happened. Wait, if I want to get views, I really need to sell this more. It's the biggest time of year for gamers, E3. It's got everything. Trailers, announcements, inconvenient timing of conferences for UK citizens. It's got everything. So, without further ado, let's talk about it.
Talk about E3 2016.
So yeah, as I said, the timing of the conferences was pretty inconvenient for someone in the UK like me, so I only actually watched one live, and that was Ubisoft. And it actually was a lot of fun to watch and snarkily tweet along to, so I was a bit disappointed it was the only one I could do so with. But anyway, let's start talking about the important part of E3, the games and my thoughts on them. And so to begin with, since it's the one I actually watched, let's focus on Ubisoft.
South Park: The Fractured But Whole.
South Park was definitely the best part of Ubisoft's conference for me. It started with a parody trailer of your typical game trailer that faked out into South Park. It hit really well, and that's true for a lot of the jokes that were in the trailers for it. As well as that, Matt Stone and Trey Parker came on to help present the game, and they handled it really well. They came across a lot more natural, genuine and amusing than the rest of the conference, and that really helped sell the game. So in this one, the kids are playing superheroes, and there's a big divide between them for how the movie franchise should be launched and who gets what movies. It's a pretty good concept and parody of the superhero industry and how big it's grown. But probably the most interesting thing they showed was the combat gameplay, because this was arguably the weaker element of the previous game, and there's been some clear improvements to it. There's a new grid setup where positioning plays an important role. You can do things like knocking an enemy into other characters for an extra attack. Another thing they announced was that if you pre-order the game, you get a copy of Stick of Truth for whatever console it is, which is pretty cool for the PS4 and Xbox One, as Stick of Truth isn't actually on them at the minute. But yeah, I think this is definitely one game to keep an eye out for.
For Honor.
For Honor was another game they showed which caught my eye. I believe originally it had been announced as a multiplayer action game, but now it apparently has a single player component as well, and they demoed that. And the thing that looked potentially interesting in it was the right analog stance system. It looked unique and gave the combat a kind of dual feeling, where you need to adjust your stance to block enemy attacks and work around your own blocks. It's something I'd like to get a personal feel for, because the person playing it didn't seem fully practiced with the system and not completely comfortable with it, but it looked interesting and unique and it definitely has potential.
Watch Dogs 2.
The last Ubisoft game I want to talk about is arguably their biggest, and that is Watch Dogs 2. And let me just get one thing out the way. I don't think Ubisoft understand how an incognito underground rebel hacker group should work, given the main character has the group's name on his fucking hat, making it really easy to catch you. But for the gameplay, it actually showed a decent array of gadgets you can use. But, as I feared, the gameplay descended into a shooter, where the hacking gadgets are just extra tools you have rather than the main focus, which I feel is the wrong approach to take and makes the game a lot less interesting for me.
Prey 2.
The main thing of interest for me in Bethesda's conference was Prey 2, and if I'm honest, I was originally pretty disappointed with this, as it seems to have no relation to the previous Prey 2, which was a sandbox sci-fi bounty hunter game, which is a really cool concept, and I don't know how we don't have a bunch of games built around this concept, though really it had basically nothing to do with the original Prey. I enjoyed the original. It had some neat gimmicks to it, like portals before Portal, and playing with perspectives and a secondary spiritual world. And if I'm honest, this new trailer seems more reminiscent to this game, with repeating the same day, with the messed upness of the world changing each time. What I took this as representing was a world/reality shifting mechanic that would have a lot more in common with the original Prey. I'll have to wait and see for there to be some actual gameplay to it, as it was just pre-rendered though.
Gears of War 4.
Microsoft, this was your chance to win me over to the Xbox One and you just didn't manage it. There were a couple of games that had potential to tempt me into it, but they both kind of fell flat for me. The first of which is Gears of War 4. I was a big fan of Epic's trilogy, but this gameplay kind of felt like it was missing the weight and power of this. To me it seemed like it was like a checklist of what Gears should be, but it didn't manage to capture the heart or feel of it. Bit disappointing really.
Scalebound.
The other game was Scalebound by Platinum, and it looked okay. It was kind of Monster Hunter by way of Drakengard, but it didn't really look like the gameplay had enough depth to it to make it really interesting. And good god, the main character would not shut up. It looks like it's a similar attempt to Dragon's Dogma Pawns as a method of informing the player without breaking immersion, but much like Dragon's Dogma, it just ends up irritating.
God of War 4.
Sony's conference definitely won E3 for me this year, and the first thing they showed was God of War 4, which I predicted a Norse God of War as the next logical step years ago, and the immediate comparison I drew for this game was The Last of Us. Between the new cinematic camera style and those knowledge gained messages hinting that the kid is going to be a persistent companion, that seems like a pretty fair comparison. But speaking of that new camera style, I'm not fully sold on it. I think the closeness of it means that the focus is on one enemy rather than being able to see a group, and I'm just not convinced this will work well in an action game rather than a shooter like The Last of Us.
Horizon Zero Dawn.
The other big gameplay segment they had was Horizon Zero Dawn, and I'm actually fairly optimistic about this game. For some reason, what I was reminded of was Metroid Prime with its scanning and more tactical combat. What looked really cool for the gameplay was that you had a centralised bow gameplay, but a variety of hunting tools built around this, like how you can set traps, shoot ropes to pin down enemies, and elemental attacks as well. This is one I'm keeping an eye out for.
Resident Evil 7.
There were a few big announcements at a conference as well, the first of which is Resident Evil 7, which is a first-person horror game and had a demo released just after the conference, and it's PT. Let's be honest, it's PT.
Insomniac SpiderMan.
Another big announcement was the Insomniac SpiderMan game, and that's cool. I like Spider-Man and I like Insomniac. From what little they showed, it looks like it's going to be a sandbox type of game rather than a linear brawler type of Spider-Man game, but there's nothing to really judge it on at this point.
Crash Bandicoot.
Arguably the biggest announcement of the whole show was that Crash Bandicoot is back. The original PS1 trilogy is being remastered for the PS4. And also, Crash is going to be in Skylanders, which, FYI, I made a joke about this last year in my E3 prediction video with Crash and the Landskyers. And they showed gameplay of Skylanders rather than the new Crash games, which seemed a bit weird to me, but whatever. One thing I noticed though in that Skylanders gameplay was that I didn't like Crash's model. It looked like somebody in a mascot costume of Crash, and I really hope they don't use this same model for the remasters.
Virtual reality.
One recurring thing between the different conferences was VR, and I'm still not convinced with VR. The problem I have with it is that if you take away the unique gimmick of it being VR, I don't think anything shown for it looked particularly good. Sorry to be a bit of a buzzkill about that.
Nintendo.
Nintendo. They didn't actually bother with a conference at E3 this year. I mean, I know you haven't actually done a conference at E3 for a while, but they've done the kind of replacement directs for a while, which have been actually pretty decent. Especially that year they announced Splatoon, that was probably the best conference they've done for a long time. But this year, they just did a bunch of several hour-long streams, and while I suppose that's cool if you want to see like Zelda gameplay, you've got a lot to draw from. For me, I just wasn't interested. I'm not a big fan of streams or Let's Plays in general, and for something like this, it's even worse. Because of it being a big conference, you've got a massive audience, so there's not going to be any interaction between the actual hosts and the viewers watching. As well as that, due to it being a big formal conference thing, the hosts had to be very safe in what they say, which makes it a lot less interesting to watch.
Ever Oasis.
But Nintendo did actually announce a new IP, but the thing is, due to this format, you probably missed it. Ever Oasis could be quite interesting. The immediate comparison I drew was that it's Dark Cloud by way of Animal Crossing, though another fair comparison would be Zelda, especially given it's developed by the team who did the 3D remake of Majora's Mask. It's just a shame a lot of people will have missed this due to the way it was announced. If it'd been a Nintendo Direct, I think this would have got a lot more coverage. But that's it for this year's E3. And you know, it's weird to think about, because I'm sure this has been going on for years, but apparently we're only on 3.